The small town of Bomar has heard criticism of its plans to gate off entrances, but it has no plans to stop. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kim Christensen.
And I'm Kyle Clark. So Bomar wants to block off public streets to outsiders. This got spicy after 9 News reporter Spencer Soisher first shared their plans a couple weeks ago. He joins us from outside the town's Board of Trustees meeting tonight. Spencer, Bomar is going to proceed with their plans to become a gated town, despite their neighbors in Denver and Littleton being like, no.
Yeah, apparently that doesn't matter. The mayors in Denver and Littleton both said they never heard back from Bomar after they sent him a letter with a warning of what they would do if Bomar decided to proceed with this plan with the gate. The town of Bomar gets state tax dollars for roads, but this thing's moving forward.
We're trying to do the right thing.
In a room that's probably not built for large crowds or our TV camera.
And this sucks that we have this in front of us right now.
Bomar neighbors were unhappy with our prior coverage and let their board of trustees know they backed their plan to put up gates at entrances to the town.
You have to have a lot of grit to stick this out.
The people who live in Bomar would get a tag for their cars to automatically open the gates. Everyone else would need a code. The neighbors say the outsiders are driving too fast.
These are all drunk drivers.
And it's not safe for the kids in the town.
They are simply passing through, increasing congestion, wear and tear, and in some cases, leading to accidents.
Bomar is doing this despite warnings from neighboring Denver and Littleton. Mayors in those cities sent a letter warning Bomar not to restrict access to public roads, or they would install their own barriers outside the gates.
We expect all of our streets to be public streets and have access to public streets and be able to use them when we need to.
How dare Denver and Littleton tell us how to run our town?
Downtown Denver, I see it every day. It's listed in the press across the country as a worst-ranked major city in the U.S.
The trustees never took a vote. The room overwhelmingly in favor. Last call to see beautiful Bomar because plans to put in gates are approved and moving forward.
Communities are not supposed to be thoroughfares for traffic, and that's effectively what has happened.
I asked the Denver mayor's office for comment today, who said they'll evaluate their plan going forward and if they need to make any changes based on what Bomar decided to do tonight. Looks like we're about to find out if they were bluffing.
So Spencer, I mean, are people in Bomar suddenly going to start like mowing their own lawns and cleaning their own houses and picking up their food rather than getting delivery, or are there going to be exceptions?
You get a code, so you can give somebody a code if you really like them or think they're a nice guy or want them to mow your lawn, I guess. But otherwise, good luck. I know South Metro Fire was here tonight and said they have some issues sometimes when there's a town that has a gate, or not a town, the community that has a gate may slow down their response times. They had some concerns about that. But yeah, they're moving forward with this.
Yeah, that's the big concern. And Spencer, you're never going to get a code.
No, Spencer's not getting it.
No, banned from codes.
Just saying.
One guy looked at me tonight and said, this is your fault. I was like, all right.
I'm sorry. That's objectively hilarious. They're gating off.
I gave him credit. It was a good line.
And the problem is the reporter told other people that they're doing it. All right, Bomar, stay classy. Spencer, thank you.
It was a nice day with some fairly mild weather out there, and it's about to get hotter. Fire danger will become a concern. 9 News Chief Meteorologist Kathy Sabin is here with our first look at the forecast.
It's like, when isn't fire danger a concern, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know. Seems like that's our weather headline every day. Today, the coolest day of the week. We held in the 70s with light winds for much of the afternoon. A lovely day and a quiet evening ahead of a big warm up. The winds will increase tomorrow. Temperatures increase. We're back to the 90s. Humidity values are up a little bit tonight. The winds have come down a little bit, but it all changes tomorrow with the arrival of a dominant high pressure ridge. That will see that red flag and fire weather warning expand to western Colorado for gusts of 40, 45 miles per hour, humidity down to the single digits. And then Wednesday, the mountains go under a fire weather watch. So far, Denver and eastern Colorado not included in the fire weather warnings, but that could certainly change as all the ingredients are there. I'm tracking a couple of thunderstorms in southeastern Colorado. Little wind, lightning, small hail potential. Not a lot going on. There's some wind advisories up in Wyoming, and just be aware Lamar, Springfield, Campbell, Tampa. We've had a couple of little rumbles of thunder, little weak storms moving through that area. Otherwise, it's pretty quiet. The temperatures in the 70s now, dropping 10 degrees by midnight. We're going to check the radar again for you, but the big story is the record high temperature potential, critical fire weather ahead of a pretty nice Father's Day weekend. Oh yeah, and summer begins on Sunday. I'll have the timing and impact of all of that with your extended forecast in a bit.
Denver police say a driver hit 3 people in a crosswalk in Lodo over the weekend.
Investigators believe that driver was drunk and ran a red light. 9 News reporter Janelle Finch is here with more on the case. Janelle.
We don't know how all 3 victims are doing tonight, but police paperwork shows officers and witnesses lifted the suspect's car to free a woman who was dragged. A driver hit 3 people in this Lodo crosswalk. Denver police say one of the victims was dragged half a block under the car.
It just really breaks my heart.
DPD says Cesario Serrato was driving with a revoked license and ran a red light. Officers say Serrato appeared to be drunk, having bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, and smelled of alcohol.
Let's design the system to be safe for human beings who sometimes make bad decisions, but those bad decisions don't have to result in a fatality.
Jill Locantori is the executive director of the Denver Streets Partnership. She advocates for cities to depend less on cars and design more communities with people in mind.
A huge number of people are killed while walking precisely because our system is designed to be unsafe for people outside of cars.
According to Denver's Vision Zero dashboard, 35 people died while walking last year. 26 people were killed in 2024, and 32 were killed in 2023.
These are our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues.
Locantori says losing these loved ones could have been avoided.
This is where if we change the system to prioritize walking and biking in transit, so that becomes the obvious and most convenient, most affordable way for people to get around, that person might have made a different decision at the beginning of the night.
She says situations like these fuel her to continue to call for systemic change.
We don't have to allow these things to continue to happen in Denver.
Court records show Serrato was arrested for a DUI in Aurora in 2021. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of driving while ability impaired and was sentenced to 12 months of probation. He appeared in court this morning where a $50,000 cash-only bond was set. Janelle Finch, 9 News.
A man who lives in Grand Junction says he paid a parking ticket that wasn't his so that he didn't have to drive across the state to go to court in Denver. He is the latest victim of a budget cut that the city made last fall, which ended a program that served as a middleman for parking disputes. Brad Sands called Steve on Your Side after getting a late notice from the city of Denver for an unpaid street sweeping ticket. $50 ticket had increased to $100 since he hadn't paid, but there were several problems. First of all, he never got the initial ticket. Second, he lives in Grand Junction, says he hasn't been to Denver in several years. Third, the ticket had Brad's license plate, but it wasn't his car. He called the city and he was told he'd have to appeal the ticket in person. Realizing he'd have to take time off work, drive here, get a hotel room, he decided paying the $100 would be easier than fighting the ticket.
Money started adding up in my head, and I was like, well, I have no recourse. I just pay the $100 fine and let it go.
Steve on Your Side presented their findings to Denver's Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. A spokeswoman said the department will now review Sand's citation. Denver is updating its rules related to lobbying. Today, the City Council passed a bill meant to make it easier to understand who's influencing decision-making. The bill will require lobbyists to disclose the clients they represent and how much they were paid. It will also add an 18-month waiting period, preventing former elected officials and members of the mayor's cabinet from immediately becoming lobbyists after leaving office. The law takes effect at the beginning of next year.
Colorado is now allowed to bring in prescription drugs from Canada, where they're often cheaper. Democratic Governor Jared Polis says the FDA approved a proposal to import at least 20 different medications. The state's been working on this since 2019, when the legislature passed a bill meant to make some common drugs more affordable. The drugs granted FDA approval for import include drugs to treat HIV, cancer, and diabetes. Ozempic is included among them. Colorado's Healthcare Policy Agency estimates importing the drugs could save $46 million over 3 years through lower insurance premiums and out-of-pocket expenses saved.
With just a couple of weeks until the 4th of July, communities across Colorado are preparing for fireworks displays.
And so are a bunch of guys preparing to show their love for America by setting some of it on fire with illegal fireworks. 9 News anchor Phil Lipoff is along with how the city of Thornton specifically is cracking down on amateur fireworks displays.
Those guys, exactly, Kyle. Last year, the Thornton police received more than 500 firework complaints during the 2-week period in and around the 4th of July. On the 4th itself, 210 complaints. That is a lot. Clearly, residents were not happy with what they were seeing and hearing, so the city council responded by passing an ordinance making firework enforcement easier for police. And here's how they did it. A couple of key updates. First, officers can now hold property owners to task when a fireworks violation is observed on their property, but the specific person can't be identified.
The biggest issue is that it requires officers to identify the specific individual who's actually lighting the fireworks in order to enforce a summons. As you can imagine, that's pretty difficult when you show up and people are partying and there's a couple hundred people there and you're trying to figure out who's actually lighting the fireworks.
So now they can just give a summons to the person who owns the property. A councilman tells us they did this ahead of the 4th to let residents know that they take all these complaints very seriously and they are ready to enforce the ordinance, which also, by the way, increases the mandatory minimum fine for a second offense. Kim?